Could we possibly see a scenario unfold where Evander Kane and the San Jose Sharks void and negate his contract? We'll discuss the possibility coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a very interesting case of news I want to talk about here today. We have reports through The Athletic talking about a scenario that could be unfolding, and we'll know probably more in the next few weeks here, that could see a scenario unfold where Evander Kane could have his contract basically wiped out with the San Jose Sharks, or they could mutually agree to void and neglect the contract, making him basically a free agent and gets the contract off the books for the Sharks. So you're probably asking yourself, well, why would Evander Kane want to void his contract? Why would the Sharks want to get rid of him? Well, let's dive into the story. In case you don't know the background here, Evander Kane had filed for bankruptcy not that long ago. So as they go through the legal proceedings for the bankruptcy, there's a lot of complications, and he has a lot of different debts and loans that are tied to his contract and his future earnings. If you're not overly familiar with bankruptcy laws and insolvency acts, essentially there's different kinds of bankruptcies that can be declared. Is what they call Chapter 7 in the United States, which is like a personal bankruptcy. There's also Chapter 11, which is more about business bankruptcy. And essentially at this point, Evander Kane had a lot of gambling debts. That's really where a lot of the debts were reportedly coming from. He had declared a huge amount of debt with very little assets in comparison, and had gone for bankruptcy proceedings. Now, the remainder of Kane's contract, which was originally a 7-year deal, I believe still pays him around $29 million over the remainder of the term left on the contract. So why would he want to avoid that and not get paid? Well, the problem is right now, before the courts, there's a request from his creditors to change the type of bankruptcy that he's filing for from Chapter 7 to Chapter 11. Now, there's one big difference here between the two when it comes to Kane's situation. In Chapter 7, which is why he filed the way it is his earnings is not really factored into anything. But in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, he can have his earnings basically be forced to go towards to pay those debts. That's why the creditors are pushing for the bankruptcy courts to change the type of bankruptcy that he filed, because they felt they were business dealings and there should be more of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which would kind of, like I said, it helps them recoup a lot more of their money based on his future earnings, because his contract was basically used as collateral in a lot of these cases to grant him access to the credit to get these loans and stuff. So obviously that's not a good situation for him. So essentially he's preventing them from getting the money. If he doesn't have it, if he doesn't have the contract anymore, they can't get money. So obviously he's not wanting to pay these debts. There could be a variety of reasons for that. Basically, the dispute between him and the creditors is starting to get to that point where it's getting pretty ugly. And it's a little bit surprising in a way that the Sharks would kind of play ball here with them and agreed to void the contract, because essentially they would be losing a pretty decent hockey player that they wanted to sign and keep on their books here for a 7-year deal just a couple years ago. However, as we know, we're in some pretty tough economic times right now, and many NHL teams, including the Sharks, they're not exempt from any of this, have had their fair share of lost revenue due to the fact that they can't host games with fans in attendance. Obviously, they're a gate-driven business. Revenues are down substantially. So if they have the opportunity to get out of a big-time contract, even if it is a decent player, they very well might be all game for that, because one, it gives them a lot more salary cap flexibility, which is great. And secondly, it really cuts back on the amount of money they have to spend. We've seen the San Jose Sharks be a really bad team last year. They had to give up their first round pick, which turned out to be number 3 overall, to the Senators as part of that Erik Karlsson trade that they had to fulfill, where they were able to get Tim Stützle, who's turned out to be a phenomenal rookie at 18 years of age. And now this year, they're trending pretty low as well in the standings. So they know that they're not going to be an overly competitive team, and they're going to need some time to kind of get things back on track. They've got some pretty horrendous contracts. Not only Kane's, it's not the worst one of the bunch. I mean, if they could get out of that Erik Karlsson deal at over $11 million, I'm sure they would take that opportunity in a heartbeat. But obviously, that's not possible. But still, in the case of Evander Kane, it's a lot of money. But you know what? It saves them a ton of money as well. And if they're not really going to be that great of a team, one player is not going to make that huge of a difference. So obviously, it makes sense why they'd be willing to cooperate here, because really, this is not really about the Sharks. This is about Evander Kane and what he had for personal and business dealings outside of the rink. So, different scenario, but I don't know what that would mean for Evander Kane for his future of playing hockey. Now, obviously, those particular loans and debts were tied to this contract. If he gets another new contract, would they be able to go after? I don't know the laws that in-depthly, so I'm not sure if that's a possibility. Would he have to take some time off until everything was cleared and then try to come back? I really don't know what that would mean for the future of his NHL career. But at this point, it's a very real possibility. Now, if the judge denies that request and it remains a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and they're not going to be able to go after those earnings like they're hoping to, then I would suspect that won't happen. But obviously, when you're making that kind of money and you're going through a bankruptcy after all those deals, it's going to be scrutinized pretty heavily, and those lenders and creditors are going to want to be able to recoup that kind of money. That's the only reason they gave it to him in the first place, was because of his future earning potential and a contract with a guaranteed amount of money that he'd be earning. And if that's not there, well, that's a problem. So we'll see what comes from this. But in the next few weeks, find out that request has been granted and the type of bankruptcy filing changes, that very well could end his career as a San Jose Shark. And like I said, what it means for that for the future, I really don't know. Certainly a bunch of question marks, and we'll have to stay tuned to see how this story unfolds. So let me know your thoughts on this situation. Do you think it's good for San Jose? If you're a Sharks fan, I'd love to know your thoughts about losing Kane possibly due to this personal mess. And do you take the savings and run, or what do you do here? Let me know your thoughts, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.